Hello and welcome to Apples and Snakes at Home. My name is Bridget Minamore and this is Series 3, Episode 5, aka our last episode of this series. I will be really sad to see it go, and I'll just say quickly thank you so much to Apples and Snakes for having me. I've really enjoyed hosting this series, and I'm really pleased that we are ending in the same way that we began, which is on a lovely high. Series 3, if you don't know, has been focusing on the theme of home, with artists exploring the idea of belonging in an increasingly fragmented world. Apples wanted to use this as an opportunity to amplify the voices of underrepresented groups by focusing the programming on Black and Brown artists living in England who may feel at home in more than one place or identity. This episode will feature performances from the Southeast from two brilliant poets, Fatima Zara and C Sharp, who I am really excited to see perform, as well as a specially commissioned poem from Setareh Ebrahimi. Hello guys, how are you?
Hi, doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm really good actually. Zara, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
Welcome. I feel this is really nice. This is sort of the ideal gig setup for me, just because not the Zoom at home pandemic stuff, that aside, it's always really lovely to have one poet that you know really well and have one poet whose work you're not as familiar with, because I feel like then you can have the two sides of your brain just going off. And so, yeah, I'm just really pleased to have you both here. Although wet is here, I'm in Southeast London. C, where are you in the world?
I'm in Seaford in East Sussex.
Ooh. And Zara?
I'm in Wickford in Essex.
Cool. Welcome from the sunny sites of the Southeast. And how long have you both been in your little parts of the world?
Well, I've been in Seaford for 8.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I came from the United States and, mostly Kansas. So a lot of my poems have to do with that part of my home.
Oh, wow. Kansas to, where was it? Tell me the name of the place where you are again.
Seaford in Sussex.
Seaford. I mean, that is an interesting journey, but I guess we'll hear more about it soon. I'm excited. And what about you, Zara?
I've been here for 3 years when my parents moved here from Saudi. I was briefly in India before that, and I grew up mainly in Saudi.
Okay. I mean, maybe I'll take the liberty of assuming that means that home is something that for both of you is a multi-layered thing. Beyond sort of the physical, what counts, maybe I'll start with you, Zara, what counts as home sort of beyond the physical space that you might be in?
I think definitely the people. Like every time we move from a place, it's definitely the people that kind of made up our daily, or made up like our celebration or like communal activities that we miss the most, as well as little rituals. I think one of the poems that I bought for today talks about like one ritual before Eid that we miss. So it's not just that, but as well as the celebration, or like, yeah, the idea of community in different places.
What about you?
I could definitely resonate with that. It's all about belonging and also culture. I feel like, coming from a native English speaking country to another native English speaking country, you would think that, culture and language wouldn't be so difficult to adapt to, but it has been, or it was in the very first couple of years. Because, culture is full of lots of different things, and it can be really messy and different depending on where you are and who you are.
Yeah, completely. Culture is just such a big beast, isn't it? And I think and I say we in sort of this really broad collective Western or Western adjacent sense, I think it's really easy to assume that something like language is a real like sort of shortcut to someone else's culture, and it just is not. I have found over the years, you might speak a language, but if you don't get the way that people move and speak and navigate that space, then there's a whole other thing. I think my mum who's been in the UK for 30 years now, from Ghana, but she says that she only started to really get British humour in the last couple of years. She says that's when she was like, okay, I sort of understand it. I don't always think it's funny, but I think I get these people now, a decade after being a British citizen. So yeah, it's a funny thing, but hopefully we'll learn more about that from both of your poems. So I think we'll start with C#. I'm so excited. It's so... The one good thing of this year has been seeing so many more poets who I haven't had a chance to see before by virtue of the digital space. And I hope that is something that continues, because yeah, I've heard about you but have not seen you perform, and now I get to from my living room. So for those of you who are like me, who have not seen C# perform before, C# is an award-winning poet and author of Black Cotton and the Swagger of Dorothy, Gale and Other Filthy Ways to Strut. Two titles that I just think are great, by the way, as an aside. Both on the stage and on the page, their work is known to be emotively, confrontational and politically charged, with uncompromising critiques on how we continuously mistreat each other, ourselves, and our planet. To this day, C# is still Black, queer, and sometimes invisible. I hope that we get to see a part of you in these words. So please, yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Mid-rusted. I was a complimentary toothpick, a Saturday morning yard sale, and a hand-me-down. I came from grandfather clocks and time with hands, limbs with needle holes, lost teeth, black teeth, chipped teeth, and tear-shaped tattoos, but I was born with mullet fever, hair teased and a razor blade on my tongue. I came from trailer parks, from railroad tracks and truckers, hitchhikers and hobos, bruises and scabs. But I was the neighbor's sugar, an apple pie on the windowsill. I was a sweetheart, a hayride, a first kiss. I was a corncob pipe and beef jerky, Papa's chewing tobacco. I was turpentine, I was matchstick, I was pocket lint. We are all a sticky heat, a bonfire near a scum-covered lake. Bud Light, Schlitz, Jack, cocaine, paint thinner, potato chips. And I was the whole damn state fair. I came from rolling pins and bobby pins and Auntie's blue moo-moo. I came from a pallet bed on a dirt floor, a hand-stitched quilt. I came from patches of fabric, knick-knack, paddywhacked, gave a dog my bones, my spit, my tears, my blood, my bones. I came from rabbit skins and deer heads. Up high, down low, too slow, I came from sawdust and grit, sweat and grit, raindrops and thimbles, miles of barbed wire and prairie and plains. I came from the cattails of the ditches, the twigs of the gutter. I came from 6-shooters and denim, belt buckle and bandana, oiled saddle and woo, doggy, you could say. I was a bank robbery, a horse, a buggy, a wagon wheel, a freight train, depot. I am a rodeo. I am a rodeo. I came from ride 'em up, ride 'em on, head 'em up, ride 'em in, cut 'em out, call 'em out, ride 'em in, rawhide. I was Johnny Caw and Caw Chief. I was Buffalo Herd, an outlaw, limestone, Osage oranges, and snake venom. I was a country western show, a rope for a lasso, a rope for lynching, a rope to walk on, a line to cross. And I was God and gospel, a rickety pew and amen. I am intelligent design and Bible study. I am heaven, Confederate heartache, Jim Crow, uh-oh. I came from barn dances and ragdoll smiles, eye holes and sheet cloaks. And trick or treat, smell my feet, bring me something good to eat, saltwater taffy, molasses barbecue, Cracker Jacks, Bazooka Bubblegum, Captain Crunch. I was an all-you-can-eat buffet and a purse full of coupons. I was bare feet on bicycle pedals, bare feet in gas stations, bare feet on porch swings, dirty toenails climbing chain-linked fences. I came from a mouthful of soap, and go and get me some lemonade, child. I came from chicken coops and kittens under the house, from mud pies and cow tipping and teepees in the woods. I came from tire swings and playgrounds made of rust, from thunder that rolls like marbles, laughs like hopscotch, skinned knees and skinned heads. I'm a pair of breeches washed in a crick, bursting with crawdads. I was corn-fed and grew some hair on my chest. I am a coyote. I am a cicada orchestra. And I can still ride a twister's back, grind a twister until my thighs turn black and blue. And I won't ever remove this grin. I will always stomp the rubble when it's over. And I was a pair of stretched and stained panties, a pair of muddy boots in the bathtub gin. And I came from garbage, burned and rusted oil drums. But nowadays, I'm just a thin floral print bedsheet pinned up to a clothesline, flapping about in this strange space. And when folks ask me where it is that I come from, I will shrug like a box turtle, fold a stray hair behind my ear, and gaze out towards where the hot pink sunsets should be. Thank you.
That was amazing. I just feel like I've traveled all the way to the Midwest. Yeah, I guess, sorry, I'm still like getting over that. Thank you so much. I feel like what was really special about that was something about the mythology of the Midwest and the mythology that I know as like a British person, and those myths that we have around like Americana, and how so much of just in its very nature, those myths are at odds with blackness, with queerness, with so many things that you still touched on, and I couldn't work out if I was listening to like a clashing of these things or a sort of culmination of them. Does that make sense?
Definitely, and in a strange roundabout way, I think it's both. I think it is a clash, but it is also like an emergence of both, because I mean, my very existence as being like a Black queer person, it just doesn't belong in Kansas, but yet I grew up there, and it's undeniably like part of me. So like there's a lot of clash when it comes to self-acceptance because of that. And you're also right as well that, you know, I feel like a lot of the images that are provided in the poem have to do with cliches, that have to do with, or maybe not just cliches, but commonly known elements of the Midwest that people, not just in the UK, but maybe worldwide, might have associated with. But I just wanted to not just list the stereotypes, but also kind of dive deeper into, you know, the personalized parts of it. So instead of just saying beer, I talk about Bud Light and Schlitz, and then other types of addictions like cocaine and potato chips, you know? So that's kind of a roundabout way of talking about it, I suppose.
Yeah. And I feel like everywhere has its own myths, but you know, the all cliches, but you know, the cliches and myths of America are maybe some of the most well-known and almost like pervasive of all the myths, of all the cliches, I feel. And to come, you know, a place like Kansas, just even reading the title of your book, The Swagger of Dorothy Gale, and I was like, yeah, that's the first thought for so many people, Dorothy and the twisters and the hurricanes and this technicolor and this grey landscape. Yeah, and is that always there then, or is it something that you grow up just not, you know, it's like, I'm different to this, that's a cliche, or do you just, when you're growing up, was it something that was always there?
Well, I guess it's multi-parted, this answer, but I guess growing up there, I didn't acknowledge my identity as somebody from the Midwest or somebody from even America. I just kind of accepted that everyone was like that, I guess, because that's everyone that I knew. But moving here across, the ocean to a different continent, it helped. Like, I probably wouldn't have even written the Swagger of Dorothy, Gale and Other Filthy Ways to Strut if it weren't for it, because I was constantly being alerted to the fact that, I have a different accent and I come from a different place, and it's not just skin deep, whereas in the United States, it was completely skin deep. And that was what otherized me in that country. So I wish I had written down your question, because there's so many different parts of it that I could dissect, but I think that's probably the best summary I can give for now.
So interesting, this idea of at home we are so often otherized in lots of ways, and then we go to a place that isn't home, and then the otherness is different, and it's a whole, we have to recalibrate ourselves, we have to think, what's going on. I always think about how, I think it was Zadie Smith who was talking about moving to New York and only wanting to write about London because she had that distance, and she was writing about London before, but she moved, as soon as she went, she was like, okay, now it's time to write about something else. And then she's like, I can't, because I've got the distance and now I can see it far clearer. And I feel like listening to that poem, it felt a lot like that with the distance you can see all of these cliches and myths and order them in a way that feels really messy and true. And I love that piece.
Thank you. Yeah, and I wrote this poem maybe the first year or second year that I lived here in the UK.
That's interesting.
Why there isn't very much talk about the UK, except for me. I think I said something about I was flapping around in a space, not really knowing where I belong, something like that. I just kind of butcherized my own poem. There's not very much mention about my new identity, my new home, my new surroundings. It's more like Zadie Smith. It's a reflection of past experiences and place.
Completely. Oh, well, have you got any more for us, please?
Oh, yes, I do. Amara Britican. In Kansas, white boys ride their rust buckets around town to pass the time. In summertime, my melanin gets so thirsty, I need to walk everywhere I go just to suck on the sunshine like gumdrops. Sometimes pickup trucks bark nigger bitch in my direction before screeching away in drunken fits of laughter. Whomever said, home is where the heart is, doesn't know the Midwestern fun that makes the Negroes fall apart in the street. Hasn't practiced taking a joke without dying to retreat. In Kansas, good old boys gather around a frat house ping pong table, gruff as beer-soaked pirates and sing-song, crooning about the ropes they've tied to trees and throats. Antidotes of crosses that burn and burn, and only one can be bothered to turn around and say, maybe you should just try to lighten up. So, in Kansas, I try not to step outside. I starve my melanin, as if a shadow could actually lighten me up. In Sussex, there are parades held at night in November. White boys take British tiki torches to the street and wear the wardrobes of my relatives like costumes, summoning the devil with their wicked little drums. In Sussex, a fruit seller will ask if I'm a Kenyan. I will shrug like my mama, bugging over arithmetic that nobody knew to check before we swallowed the native taste off our tongues. In Sussex, a big-eared geezer will glare at me in a railroad station, saunter over and spew muppet head before walking off. That is not my name, I say. Then he informs me that I'm a filthy golly before asking me to leave his country. 2 seats over, a mother stays silent. But I find the gawking gaze of her toddler refreshing. A small, squawking voice asking important questions like, Mommy, why is he so brown? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I feel like I could ask how that poem came to be, but I feel like there's lots of, yeah, a lot of that was answered in the poem. Just the parallels of not just racism or racial tension, but the way that intersects with masculinity and yeah, I just was thinking a lot. I'm not sure if every single reference was about men in some way, but I was just thinking so much of this image of racist masculinity that is worldwide, and how, yeah, I don't know if that was something that was in your head when you were writing the poem, or if that was the main aim, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Honestly, I don't think that's kind of new to me, but I do understand why you would think that, because there is a lot of masculinity presented in both sides of that poem, both the beginning and the ending. Maybe it was just a subconscious thing, because I even as the speaker at the very end, the little kid points out the speaker as being, you know, a masculine presence, and most people wouldn't think of me as being that. So, but obviously, like, the other masculine presences in the poem itself are very negative and very racist. Yeah. Maybe I kind of want to not dissect, but like study that poem a bit more and try to maybe get a better understanding of myself along the way.
Well, it's the sort of poem that I feel is yeah, I want to study that poem and try and understand myself a little better, because you have that, especially if you're a person of color who is traveling in any way, you see those parallels in things, in racism. You see the differences around the world, because, you know, the world broadly has its, you know, every single country, every single city has its own nuances. I'm assuming you wrote that after you came to the UK, but how long had you been here before that poem came about?
Oh gosh, I think I wrote that poem maybe 2 years ago.
Okay, so more recently.
Yeah, it's a very recent poem. It's in my newest collection, Black Cotton, which is very heavily discussing race and being blackness, I guess, blackness in space, mostly the UK.
And navigating that. And can I also just ask, why black cotton?
Well, there's a couple of references to black cotton, specifically being, you know, Afro-textured hair, is a type of black cotton. And I dissect, I guess I portion out the book in 3 different sections. So there's a section called dreads, another one called taper fade, another one called cornrows. And each of those sections kind of have their own theme. So one has to do with childhood experiences, and it's all dedicated to my mother. So it's like dedicated to Mama at the very beginning, and there's lots of different references to her, as well as, you know, internalized racism runs deep within that book as well, and acknowledging that racism isn't just a white thing. It's something that whiteness intrudes upon every person within society, including Black and brown people.
Completely. God, the relationship between hair and home is something that I feel like I could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and yeah, so I won't, sadly, but I will instead get your book and see if it will help me dissect those sticky thoughts and feelings that so many of us do have. Thank you so much for those 2. I just feel like I've been knocked back a little bit, to be honest. Yeah, in the best way. And I feel like this. I don't know what everyone's like at home, but it's fine. We can all take a breath. And then we're going to watch a poetry video and see how that goes. But yeah, one more time, C#, thank you so much for sharing with us today. So next up, we are going to watch the 5th of our Apples and Snakes at Home specially commissioned poetry videos. Each of them have been really, really different to the others, so I have no idea what to expect, but I'm very excited. This piece comes from Setareh Ebrahimi, who is an Iranian-British poet living and working in Faversham in Kent. She has been published numerous times in various journals and magazines, including Bristol Star, Confluence, and Ink, Sweat and Tears. Setareh released her first pamphlet of poetry called In My Arms from Bad Betty Press in 2018. And if you don't know about Bad Betty Press, please get to know, because they are maybe the most exciting, for me anyway, the most exciting smaller press at the moment. I just think their work is excellent, and the poets they produce are excellent too. But Setareh is currently a contributing editor for Thanet Writers, and in 2008 was one of the poets in residence of the Margate Bookie at the Turner Contemporary Gallery. So let's watch her video.
Eating at Mother's. Here habits change. It's not that you're hungry, or that you usually don't have enough to eat. It's only half a question of liking what's on offer, although no one cooks ethnic food, English food, or own brand concoctions in the same right-wrong way. When at Mother's you gorge, hard, shriveled, salted almonds that would make eyes water, so much summer fruits that their taste is lost and you feel sick. Dinner with an equal amount of bread, then another dinner with anyone that arrives. Perhaps it's a question of stretching. Again, it's not your money and you want to test the faith that what's provided is endless, or one of surprise. You didn't select the menu. Once started, you must excel, scrape jars, look in every cupboard and drawer. Things that if had in isolation seem ridiculous and bland are treated with respect. Egg on toast, cereal, rice and potatoes seasoned with saffron. Occasionally there's a reprimand, or worse, a little despair in the cook's eye. Reluctantly, you call off your gut. This eating is a way to be rich. Something that is not hunger squirms with increasing strength. Strange to think that you'll be providing the plates and places for someone. My auntie's flat. My auntie's flat had 2 bedrooms next to each other and a wet room coming off one of the bedrooms. There was a single toilet cubicle that you could squat at coming straight off the living room. A couple of times I saw cockroaches. Another auntie would say, "When you see cockroaches, always wait for another, because they travel in pairs." My auntie's flat was the safest place in the world, along with my nan's. My nan had a weird back room with a ceiling of opaque glass tiles that let the light in. It had a lot of plants. Sometimes we slept there. I remember one night, scared because I thought footsteps upstairs were my heartbeat. When love covers everything like furniture protection in case of fancy guests, people notice it straight away. Everyone says that to us, my mother-in-law says, but we don't like this house, even though it's always clean, has established routine. Before my husband was so, we'd go there when it was empty and close the door behind us, like we'd heaved a castle gate, giggling in bed drinking, trying to see what things around the house we could get high off, the dog pushing us slowly out of bed. The family home my father bought, an ill-advised whim to represent his money in physical form where he grew up, was where I, my sister and cousin who stayed with us for weeks because her mother was kind and we weren't allowed out, cowered on the 3rd floor, as voices grew louder downstairs and ended with a thump. That feeling in my auntie's flat. I suppose some children have that all the time.
I really enjoyed that. I feel like I've got so much. Yeah, again, falling through my head in lots of lovely different ways. I really liked the images which felt so familiar and so like close, and then the language which sometimes was like that and then sometimes just veered off into this like not quite painful place but like a more fraught place, and then it just came back down. Does that make sense? Yeah, it was lovely, wasn't it? I don't know, what did you guys think?
I really enjoyed the way it kind of speaks of her auntie's flat, and it feels so important right now because everyone's kind of thinking about the spaces they're quarantined in, because you're spending so much time here and not stepping out. So it felt important right now. And the mention of food as well. I think that's one of the first things that you kind of reckon with when you move. And I don't think it ever goes away. The feeling of missing the food from where you're from, or yeah, the kind of food culture where you're at. So it really speaks to the idea of home and belonging.
Completely. I think if there are a few on our, broad theme list of this series, food has been right up there along with physical space. It's been particularly weird to be doing this series in lockdown, in the way that everything has been particularly weird. But when we are just literally stuck in a place that we are calling home to some degree, it really makes you reckon with why this place and why this space. And I think I said this last week or the week before, but this idea that, I have 2 homes or 3 homes or 4 homes, and then actually there was only really one place that I really considered doing lockdown in, and I was like, well, have I answered this question for myself? That this is really home, because I didn't consider going to Ghana with my family. I didn't consider staying at my mother's house. I was like, no, of course I'm going to stay at the place where there's so much to dive into that. But yeah, that video just really, it was lovely.
One of the things, going back to the images of, an auntie's house, I think safe spaces are things that we don't oftentimes think about when we think about home, but they are sanctuaries for individual people. And I think with COVID being around now and lockdown happening, oftentimes the safe space doesn't quite feel as safe anymore. It's so mundane. At least for me, it feels very mundane, because it's been in lots of ways, work life has intruded upon my sanctuary space, and so I feel like it's disappearing, my sense of home at the present time, which is sad. I feel like I'm mourning a home at the moment.
I totally understand what you mean. I think, and it's funny because I've been working from home for most of my life, but this just feels different, and I feel like really intruded upon in a way that I didn't before. I'm not sure why that is or how that is. Maybe it's a mental thing. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a natural reaction to the world feeling more difficult. Of course, the world is going to come into our safe spaces a little bit more.
I think, well, I'm just assuming for you it was a choice, but now it's not.
Yeah. Choice is all we want, isn't it? Has it been the same for you, Zara? Or have you felt like that balance has been all right for you?
No, it's changed quite a lot, because even before lockdown started, and even right now, like, I'm still going to uni. And before, I kind of had the release of going to like face-to-face classes all the time and meeting people and sitting in the lecture hall. And now having to do that online from like the confines of my bedroom or sitting room, it really has blurred the lines of like private and public, as well as any sort of meeting, like even calling up a friend or meetings with like a lecturer. Everything's happening in the same space. So it's really disconcerting about where I'm at right now, because before, at least that movement of like going from home to uni or like back signified something, like a change. So yeah.
Do you have ways of trying to signify that change, or are you just... I've been trying to falsify ways, like going for a walk and then coming back home, but it hasn't really worked. So I don't know, maybe you both have better ways of tricking the brain into giving those distinctions.
I mean, I'm in my closet right now, so like behind this curtain are all my clothes, and I guess like what you can't see is maybe I'm just doing like the ostrich in the sand method. If it doesn't look like home, then it's not. It's really an office space.
Feels officey. It's nice. We've all had that thing where it's like, what part of my... And even this is, everyone's looking into our homes. I feel slightly intrusive, but I've got very used to it over the past 6 months, just seeing a small square of somebody's home and choosing which part of my home to show has been very like fraught, because I'm like, should I stay in my room? Should I angle a window? Should I... I don't know. I changed it up and then felt really strange. I was like, oh God, this is weird. Like, why am I upstairs in my bedroom? Everyone's seeing my room. And it doesn't, it's just a blank wall. But I was like, oh no, help, everyone's seeing, everyone's watching, and they're not, or maybe they are, I don't know.
It's another extension of fashion, really, isn't it? Like, it's not just our appearance anymore, it's our surroundings that, you know, people are going to look at and maybe have judgmental views on.
Oh God, I hope not. If you're watching all of these things, all of these episodes, please don't be judging my like sad wall and my flatmates art. Like this is it. This is all I've got. I have been sometimes, like, occasionally I've angled plants to make it look a bit more like nice. Today I didn't bother. I've had too many Zoom calls where I'm like late because I'm just faffing around with like stools and plants and flowers to make myself look like more fancy, as opposed to the fact that I'm in my pajamas from the waist down, which doesn't always happen, but does happen sometimes. We veered off home slightly. One more thing that I was just thinking of after Setareh's video was just that idea, and you touched on it, when you talked about like black and brown bodies in space. Those moments when we, as black and brown people, feel just at odds with the space around us, or those moments when we just feel completely in the space. And how, so there was a moment at the beginning of the video where I think, you know, the bit with the family on a boat, and I could just see the sea, and I couldn't work, it took me a second, and I was like, are they at odds or are they at ease here? I'm not sure. Because I was like, is this going to be them in like the English countryside, or is this going to be them in like my sort of my projections of like somewhere maybe in the Middle East, or I don't know, like I just was like, these are the two options that we've got, and which one is it? And you know, so much of that is about my own assumptions, but yeah, it's and then, you know, they were just smiling, and I wasn't paying attention to any of that. I was like, no, but where are they? Because and then in the next clip, when you know, you're hearing the sea and it felt like Brighton or something, it just immediately felt, I was like, oh, this must be more difficult. And I was like, but is it? Yeah, we have so many assumptions about who belongs where, even ourselves, don't we?
Absolutely.
Okay, right, I think we have some time for more poems. But yeah, one last time, thank you so much to Setareh Ebrahimi. Please check out her work, In My Arms, from Bad Betty Press. Hello, sorry, I looked at you, Zara, and then realised obviously I'm just looking at the screen, so it won't look any different. It's only been 7 months and I'm still not used to the internet. So next up, we're going to have some poems from Fatima Zara. How are we feeling? Are we good? Good. Okay. So if you do not know, Fatima Zara is an Indian poet based in Essex. She is a Barbican Young Poet and a Roundhouse Poetry Collective alumni, which is how I know her, because she was just an absolute star at the Roundhouse and still is. Her work has been published or is forthcoming in Slam, You're Gonna Want to Hear This, A Letter, A Poem, A Home, and Tentacular Magazine. And she's currently completing her MA in Creative Writing and Education at Goldsmiths, University of London. I'm really excited to see you read some work. How have you been? Are you well?
I'm okay. Yeah, it's been weird, kind of. It's mostly just been trying to get through each day, like looking at work and trying to find things to, I suppose, like stay grounded with this. And I feel like, I mean, just like everyone, kind of been through like phases of like ups and downs during the pandemic, but I'm okay now.
Okay.
Mostly.
Mostly. It's the caveat to everything at the moment, isn't it? Well, hopefully we'll get a little insight to all of that in your work. Please take it away.
So this first poem is called Sargon. Sargon is one letter away from meaning heaven in Malayalam. And it's also the name of like the expat community events where I was growing up in Jeddah. So yeah. I miss hearing my friends say she went to heaven for the weekend. How everyone was dancing all night. how her parents lost their frowns in the crowd, how there were string lights everywhere. I asked her why she left. I was 6. God knows I don't still picture Jannah the way I did. How the class prefect tries her best sermon pitch as, you know, Albaik, they come flying to you in heaven. I've downsized my dua since. They exchange outfits at the gates of heaven. Asks about a boy. Asks about a dead grandfather. Of all the heavens I've hoarded, I like the ones with the flying boxes of fried chicken best. The one where the bouncers speak Arabic. The one where I don't need the right passport to stay. This next poem is after Kai Miller. It's called A Short History of All the Places I've Lived in. 1. We made dupatta forts and palaces out of the 4 rooms. My siblings trailing after each other as we ran across imaginary playgrounds or dormant volcanoes and cackling witches. The apartment on the 1st floor in the sand-coated building shrunk around us as we sprouted inches. When friends crunch their nose, they walk into the room I share with my siblings and their stuffed toys. 2. I spent my first weekend throwing up in a bathroom with the white tiles and frosted glass door. Pizza and blue pills that were supposed to help with the food poisoning all swirling. This was the price of living alone, I thought, sinking to the floor for comfort. Each night I carried remnants of my day into bed. A midnight drive to the mountains. An imagined kiss. Cry stifled by the pillow. The bed grows heavier with my secrets. Uma doesn't recognize me when she flies down to deliver me from my madness. 3. I remember an abandoned runway in the middle of our flat. Dirty walls and tiles I learned to walk on. This flat I only know from photographs and Uma's retellings of how she'd be on her knees, scraping the dirt off the floor. I wince at every mention of my night-long crying and daylight tyranny. How Uma would watch me take dolls apart or away from my first best friend. I wonder if she spoke to the walls back then. This 3rd poem is called Mehendi Ode. O first teacher of patience, the slow drip of each second as I fidget in my seat, eyes on my palms, waiting for the cool brown of the mehendi to turn dry. O Muslim tattoo, O human etch-a-sketch, how everyone asks of it at Eidgah. Who drew it? Which cone? How long? Each family hold their own secret to making it turn darker. Olive oil and cotton pads, lemon juice and sugar dabbed on it after it dries. Oh, long hours of cousins hunched over me. Replicating designs from yellowed pages of books, they spin an hour into flowers and leaves on my restless hands, their brows furrowed as the cone clogs and sputters. Last night I drew it on again, craving the laughter of other women in the room, feeding each other ghee sweets as we wait the long wait. Gossip slipped into each other's palms, open.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was lovely. And a lovely tribute and shout out to Camilla, who was our guest last week, which was nice. One thing I'm always struck by in your work is how not just how you touch on home and how you talk about home, but how you often remind us, remind everyone that so much about home, that home is, so much of our relationship with home is about movement around home and movement away from home, and arrival at home and what that means. I feel like all your poems always have so much movement in them. And I don't know if that's just a simple like reflection of the fact that you've gone from you've traveled a lot and you've had a lot of homes, but I don't know, are you aware of that as you write? There's just, we move from place to place to space, and I'm always just like catching up in a nice way.
I think that's just my mindset at all times. Like even when the pandemic started, I think when everyone's kind of checking like on the corona stats, I was looking at what's happening here, but as well as in India and Saudi. Like at all times, my mind's at different places. And I feel like that does come through when I talk or when I do write. Even when like we're sitting with family at dinner table, we're kind of, you know, there'd be like a mention of like a cousin from like this place or something that's happening with someone here. So it's always scattered, I feel. And it's nice to hear that, you know, it kind of comes through for you as well as a listener.
No, completely. You can hear that. And I don't know, does language come into that as well, as someone who speaks more than one language, and I'm assuming associates different languages with the different places as well?
Yeah, I think before I used to be more guarded, in the sense I used to strictly write only in English, even though I'm most comfortable in Malayalam. Like as soon as I'm on phone with my parents, I lapse into Malayalam, or I know I'm home when I hear someone speak Malayalam in like the vicinity in public. So that kind of thing with language. But now I'm getting more comfortable including that and including more parts of myself. And obviously language had like a different, you know, way in which it made me feel like belonging to like a different place. As soon as I hear Arabic, it reminds me of Saudi and that kind of thing. So bringing, I think, each part of myself, I'm more comfortable now and okay with, I suppose, including like references or phrases in that without like having to put a footnote at times. And I suppose having like that kind of ownership and being like, okay, this is going to be meaningful to whoever knows it, and you know, still meaningful even if you don't.
Completely. But it's hard. It feels quite, yeah, I think it's always a very brave thing, a good brave thing to say, no, this is for who it's for, and it's okay if it's not for everyone at all times, because home cannot be for everyone at all times, you know. Like, yeah, nothing can be for everyone at all times, and there's something special about that rather than exclusionary. Yeah, you really articulate that split between, yeah, but whether it's language or place or even the thoughts. Yeah, it's like my mum always tells me that the more, depending on how she feels, sometimes if she speaks English all the time, she either starts dreaming lots in English, or her mind sort of goes no and starts dreaming in Tree, like sort of aggressively to counter what's going on in the sort of woken world. And I find that really funny. And I was like, but how? And she's like, oh, it just does. I don't know. I can't control it. And I love the idea of our subconscious just rebelling against what might be happening, and you know, language isn't as simple as English and not English. Language is sometimes even things like slang and ways of speaking, or yeah, and how we navigate that, which often tell us about home. You probably could learn so much about how people who maybe have only speak English and have lived their whole lives in one tiny patch of the UK, but will still speak 7 different types of English, and depending on what type of English they're speaking, you know if they're home or if they're not. Yeah, so much going on. But more poetry would be the best thing, I think. Give me more, all the poetry. I'm ready.
Okay. So when I was compiling this, I was thinking of kind of the unspoken connection between these poems and, you know, what makes home for me. So this is for my sister. She's the youngest one in the family, but my biggest critique. She's read all my poems, and She's someone who I enjoy having conversations about, like poetry and reading with. For Zeba. The first time we met, I'd skipped school to be there, rocking back and forth in the fluorescent light, swayed by the smell of antiseptics and whir of machines waking up. We wait for you. Held by the hypnotic tape of 4 cells blooming into a baby, we fix our eyes to the only screen that didn't wear a frown. When the nurse brings you out in your brown striped pajamas, Upa rubs a date in your cheek and whispers the azan. We watch your fingers like carrots sticking out of the blanket and claim our features on your face. And you spend the rest of your life proving to be a different brand of brilliant none of us saw coming. This next poem is called Ramadan 2019. I think having to celebrate all our festivals and kind of having to recreate the rituals during the lockdown has really made me, I think, reckon with what Ramadan and Eid and all of our birthdays means to me. And this one's from last year. We stalk the moon all month round, lick our lips till the azan goes off on our phones, dig our teeth into the soft flesh of dates, wash it down with Ruh Hafsa, rinse and repeat. The scholars paste their eyes to the sky, the crowds trade their eyeballs for telescopes. We watch the moon turn bashful, wait for henna stains to appear, a gunshot signal, to pull our smiles out of the closet, strutting in their Eid clothes. This last poem is, I think, the first one I ever wrote. By the end of, I suppose, my third move, kind of having to reckon with all of the homes that I carry with me. It's called Suitcase. Here's to the ones that waltz into this world with suitcases. The ones with more stamps on their passport than fingers or toes. The ones who learned early to pack all their memories, goodbyes, and clothes into 23 kilograms in cabin baggage. You are a dossier of every last place you fell in love with. You are the Lebanese diner next to the first house that watched you scrape your knees. You are the rickety swing in the backyard of your granddad's house in Kerala. You are every bridge across the Thames and the people crossing it. You, with your hummus-loving heart and your dancing tongue that lifts, twists, and settle 3 languages, but trembles at any mention of home, Bait, Ghar. Here's your suitcase, with every last goodbye from a friend that is now a thumbtack on a world map. Here are your dreams for a compass, your parents' prayers, your life vest.
Thank you. That was, really lovely. I remember the first time I heard that Suitcase poem and just thinking, yes. Maybe I'll start with your sister because of that beautiful poem you started with. And you mentioned at the beginning of this episode that, people are so often what make home, but family in particular, whether that be chosen or sort of, what's the opposite of chosen? Given? I don't know. Maybe I quite like that. Given family to counter chosen family. Maybe I'll use that. But yeah, so often our home, like there's often 1 or 2 people who really, really, really like epitomize what home can mean. And so often siblings, again, whether that's chosen or given, are part of that. I don't have any, so I always love poems about siblings. I'm always like, wow, what is this strange concept? But I love that you have I mean, you only had one, but you have all these poems about your sister and how she fits into that narrative of home for you.
Yeah, I think I've really had to reckon with what home might be like, particularly during this lockdown, and having to kind of think about where I might want to be next year, whether that's choosing to stay here or moving someplace else, or moving back to a place that's familiar. And I've, kind of come to realize that it's not any of the places that I really lived in. When people do ask, it is ultimately going to be where my family is, whether they're, going to continue to stay here or whether they move somewhere. And I think I've only spent like 2 years away from them, right after school when I moved to India on my own. And until then, when you're under your parents' roof, you kind of take it for granted that that's home. When people ask you, you're thinking about all the other places you could be in. But I think living for 2 years away and kind of having to only see them through like video calls and things like that made me, made it a much more like bigger part of my life, or like a much more meaningful connection. And now, yeah, that's kind of at the forefront of what home would be for me, my 3 siblings and my parents.
Yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. And you touched on ritual and religion, which was lovely. But again, in this time, which I keep on talking about, but what else is there to talk about? Seeing the way that people have had to find new ways to gather and find new ways to do the rituals that make sense to them and that give them comfort has been, maybe a strange blessing of this time, because we're actually so much more, maybe not resilient, but so much more resourceful than I imagined. I think if you told me a year ago that I would be going to sit in a cold park with a friend while like she watched Diwali like fireworks on her phone, I'd be like, what are you talking about? But finding that, it's like, okay, I guess we will cycle in the rain to go and watch this from 3 meters away on an iPad, and we're all going to love it and it's going to be great. I just wouldn't have believed that if you told me, but this is what we're doing, and it's kind of magical to see that we can maybe not to the same extent, but we can have that joy in those small ways. And hearing your poem, you said you wrote it a year ago, right? The one that looked at
the one about Ramadan.
Does it feel the same now reading that, or is it different to you?
I think when I wrote it, I was being nostalgic for the Ramadans we spent in Saudi, because I lived there for 17 years, and that's a lot of Ramadans, and that became like our reference for it, or like standard for how it would go normally. Having like getting to hear the azan and like being part of a whole country that celebrates it and takes part in it, that was taken for granted. So last year when I wrote it, I think I was nostalgic for that, and this year when I wrote it, I was even more nostalgic to just even be around other people, forget Saudi and having that kind of luxury, but just to be able to visit like our family here and to even go to each other's houses. So it's definitely added like in meaning, I think, with each passing year. And I resonate with what you've said about having to kind of change how we've thought about like our rituals and celebrations. Like obviously this Ramadan and Eid, it's all about community. You go to your local mosque, you take part in the prayers, and then you hug everyone who's there. You come home and you visit each other's house if you can. And this year we've had to be more intentional with how we do it. Everyone actually coming together to kind of put a Zoom call on for the family on Eid morning, or with Ramadan as well, just kind of sharing pictures of what we've made instead of going to each other's houses. We've kind of had to like change, but also it's been nice in a different way. Yeah.
That's lovely. And you just use the word in like intentional, which I think is such a nice word to throw into the home conversation, and maybe touches on your last poem about this, the idea of suitcases, and because maybe is there anything more intentional about going from one home to another than packing? I feel like maybe not. Because that, for me, I don't really feel like I'm going somewhere until I start to pack, which is why I often, I'm a late packer. I'm a morning of, even like big moves, like house moves. I'm a like day, like weekend before. But I think that ritual is just as important into telling ourselves, no, I am going from point A to point B, and even whether I'm packing a tiny little bag or I'm packing up my entire, life. I've never packed up my entire life and gone across an ocean like both of you, but I can imagine, that is just so much a part of the home story, the packing story as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I was thinking a lot about this recently because I heard Nick McCullough read one of his airport poems, and he says that for him, airports are kind of his home more than any of the places he's been to, and he has like a series of poems of airports he's been in. And for me, that's more packing and suitcases, because it's until I see like brown boxes all over the house that it really dawns on me that we're really moving, or this is happening again, and the kind of repeated sense of, I suppose, losing a place maybe, or almost saying goodbye. But I think the first major move, when the whole family left Saudi, not just me, it didn't even dawn on us even when we were packing. It was only when we went to the airport and we have like a plastic card as a residence permit. That's all we had to show for like the 17 years we lived there. And what happens when you leave permanently is they cut up your card right before you board your flight. And I think that was the first time it really dawned that I'd be leaving a place. But now, I suppose a suitcase and like something more temporary, or I suppose less jarring, has become like a placeholder for that.
Definitely. That is maybe the most unsubtle metaphor that I have ever heard of. It's like, you're leaving, let's literally take your residency card and cut it up. But yeah, there's nothing like that to oh God, I think I'd weep if someone did that in front of me. I don't know. I'll pull you. And I can imagine that for you, C Sharp, as well, that this, the packing, the suit, because you packed up your whole life and came over here, and I can imagine that was part of the letting go process of an old home.
I mean, objects definitely represent home. Because it's what occupies your home anyway. So yeah, when you pack up things, it does symbolize a lot. And I feel like every move I've ever had in my entire life, I can remember doing the packing procedures, because I feel like that in itself is a ritual. But I've lived in lots of different homes though, all over the United States, and there's nothing else like it, like that ritual itself.
Completely. And yeah, one of the blessings I think for me this summer has been, last year I decided to do a longer contract for the place that I'm living in, which I'm so grateful for, because I think my brain just wouldn't have been able to handle packing up in November, which is when the original contract was going to end. I don't even think I could handle like the thought of moving. And lots of people have had to move in a pandemic for good reasons, but also for lots of really difficult reasons, because of money and jobs and evictions and all of the stuff that's going on in the world at the moment. And I feel very grateful to in some way have a home that feels relatively stable, or the most stable it's been maybe my whole life, which is always a blessing, I think, for anyone who has that. So many poems, so many thoughts from both of you, but thank you very much. This was a lovely way to end, I think, the Apples and Snakes at Home series. It's time for us to finish, but I might just ask you one last question before we go, which is just, we've ended in the sexy Southeast, and is there one thing about, as both of you have moved here rather than sort of being born in here, is there one thing that you've learned that surprised you about where you've moved to, or one thing that has that continues to surprise you even? And I'll throw that to both of you. Or one thing you wish people would know about where you're living.
I think one thing that surprises me is my resilience and ability to adapt. I don't really think of myself as a resilient person or an adaptable person, but I think that, you know, actions speak volumes, and the fact that I was able to leave an environment that I was so comfortable with, even though I hated it. Moving is scary when you move to a different country. So I think the fact that I've been able to do that and maintain this space and claim it as my own and become a British citizen, I feel like that really demonstrates my resilience.
That's lovely. Zara?
Mine's nowhere as deep as that.
Which is fine.
I think the weather continues to surprise both like me and my family. I think when we moved, like our first neighbor, they're like this couple in their 70s and they've been here all their life. And I think my mom was telling them about how she'd like either take an umbrella with her and that day wouldn't rain, or she would like be expecting a sunny day when you step out of the house, but it would be the opposite after a few hours. And they said they've lived here all their life and still they can't tell what it's going to be like on a daily basis. And it's so different from where I've grown up. Like where in Saudi it was kind of like a state of perpetual summer. And in India, whenever we go to visit, it's like monsoon season always. And I think really having to reckon with seeing like the 4 different seasons and not just reading about it, I think really drills in that we are in like a completely different place. Seeing like snow or like colors outside, it really drills in the idea that I've moved, even though I'm with family, and we feel like a sense of home.
I love that. Well, I feel like maybe there's no more apt way to end our series of gigs about home, where we've got Black and brown poets from across England talking about their relationship with home. There's no more apt way than ending that talking about both the resilience of us all and the weather. Maybe the most English way of ending this series, because they seem to be the 2 things I talk about with my friends, my Black and brown poet friends, all the time. Thank you so much, C#. Thank you so much, Fatima Zara. One more time, if you would like to hear and read more of their work, please check out C#'s The Swagger of Dorothy, Gale and Other Filthy Ways to Strut, and Black Cotton, and then Fatima Zara's forthcoming. I've forgotten. Tell me the name. That's so terrible. I've known for so long.
Oh, forthcoming debut pamphlet.
Yes.
Palm Guzzles.
Tell me, say one more time.
Date Palm Guzzles.
Palm Guzzles. Okay. When is it coming out? Or am I not allowed to ask? That's being really, I feel like an auntie, sorry.
I'm still working on it.
Good. Quick. No, I shouldn't say that. Sorry, it's just old Roundhouse Poetry Collective auntie energy. But I'm waiting and soon come. I've been Bridget Minamore. I've been your host this series. Thank you one more time. If you would like to check out more from Apples and Snakes, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which means you can watch gigs like this, as well as lovely one-offs during lockdown. Apples and Snakes have been producing lots of different work for all of us, and it's all accessible. It's been great to be a part of it. Thank you so much to all of our poets over this series. I won't list them because I'll definitely forget one name, but they've all been fantastic, and it's been a pleasure to share the space with them, even in the virtual world. Thanks so much to Tom and Robert, who have helped put this all together behind the scenes, just because, there is a lot that goes into getting a virtual gig online. And I think that's something we should not forget in these times when the virtual gig has been a saving grace for so many of us. Hope everyone is safe and well. And hopefully we can be in a less virtual, more physical space at some point sooner rather than later. Thanks very much and goodbye.